Hi, David. I've read your draft of the thesis-based paper and have some ideas for you to look at as you revise the paper. I'll begin with the works cited page. So for the source, gamers make good surgeons. Since there is no author for it, then there's nothing here at the first part of it. Begin with the title. This is really just nonsense. This is not the author, and that's what goes there. If there is no author, then begin with the title. The Washington Post article looks okay. The Stern one looks okay. And the way you'll handle the personal interview here is kind of similar. What I would suggest you do is delete that. Begin with Killarney, Joseph. That's the person's name, personal interview, that. You can identify the DVM in the paper. I'm not sure what DVM stands for. So you might clarify that when you introduce the particular source. That really was, I think, the best, that really is, let's put it that way, the best part of your paper right now. So as you move forward, be sure to keep that section. In your opening paragraph, I think you're just trying to get started here, so you have a kind of general opening about how everything in the world is run by computers. So why is it different in the operating room? And then you ask this question, which is not really the question your paper is trying to answer. Should surgeons be able to play video games, or should they learn by doing on the job? There may be an answer to that question, but that's simply not what your paper is about. I think your paper is about the fact that, despite the bad rap the video games get in our popular culture, they do help prepare people to handle technology, or they do give them certain skills that are they'd be carried over to other lines of work. That's really all your paper can get at, is that there are some benefits for people who go into surgery from playing video games. So as you get into your first paragraph, this first sentence is kind of confusing in really two ways. One is that it doesn't really finish. You say, although most people would not agree that video games are not good for people that want to go into the surgery field, there should be a comma there, and then the sentence that you're introducing. That's not what happens. The other things going on are these kind of double negatives that you're using, that most people would not agree that video games are not good. Well, that means most people would agree that video games are good. And I'm not sure that's the point you're trying to make either. In fact, because of the however down here, it's pretty clear that what you're trying to say is that most people assume video games are not good for people who want to become surgeons. But the opposite is true. That's the point you seem to be trying to make. I think at some point, when you use the word you, it's probably not appropriate, because you're not really talking about to general readers here. So, for instance, you're writing about people who are going to become surgeons. I mean, that's like writing about people who are going to become fighter pilots. There just aren't that many of them out there, and not everyone could do it. So really think in terms with the you, what group of people are you really talking about? Doctors training to become surgeons or something like that. I don't think it's necessarily true here, but it may be true later in the paper. Are you talking about video games like, Call of Duty, or are you talking about video trainers? These are designed by medical supply companies, probably, or medical equipment companies, to help surgeons learn how to use the equipment. I think maybe the last article you cite is talking about that and not specifically about video games, but that's pretty clearly what's going on here. Now, one of the things that Turnitin does is it shows where the language of your source is similar to the language you're using. And you'll see in this particular case, you're repeating a lot of the original phrasing from the articles. In some cases, just making a few changes. I think the numeral 2 changed to the word 2. I think in this particular case, who changed to that, and that's just not it's not a good habit. As you paraphrase, you want to be creating your own sentences, not replacing a few random words of the original sentence. You can plagiarize the sentence structure as much as you can plagiarize ideas. The other issue that comes up with this particular article is the fact that the citation occurs at the end, and it's not even really clear that it is a citation. Gamers Make Good Surgeons is the title of the article, but you need to write it like it's a title. That means capitalizing Gamers Make Good Surgeons and placing it in quotation marks. Right now, it just seems to be a parenthetical expression that most people aren't going to recognize as a title. Plus, since the citation comes at the end, it's not real clear what before it is being cited. It's much better to have a signal phrase. And let's say you did it maybe at this point, okay, where, an article, the article Gamers Make Good Surgeons, explains how video games improve hand-eye coordination. Now, hand-eye coordination is not a phrase that you can necessarily paraphrase. That's the phrase, but the help increase which strengthens surgical skills, that's too close to the original. When the Sammy Killick shows up, Killick is referenced in that article, but I think you want to say something like this article describes research done by Dr. Sammy Killick that showed, whatever it is about high school students and college students, being better prepared than residents who didn't play video games. But that part needs to be put in your own words, but it also has to be linked more closely to this article. So certainly you can cite it at the end, but it's also important to indicate where the borrowing, the paraphrasing, summarizing begins. So a similar thing happens when we get to the next paragraph. This is the paragraph that begins with introducing the source, Andrew Stern, and then the idea of laparoscopic surgery. So it appears to be a paragraph that's going to be about laparoscopic surgery. But in the middle, it switches really to this topic of another study about how surgeons in general who play video games do better. And then toward the end of it, it introduces this Dr. Rosser and then a source called Gentile. So I would certainly, most readers would expect Rosser and Gentile to be on the works cited page, but they're not because they are included in Stern's article. So you introduce Stern here, but the point is that all of the stuff in this paragraph comes from Stern's article. So even this quote, where he's quoting Gentile, this is quoted in Stern. That's you need to clarify where that information is coming from. The other issue, though, is that it just becomes a paragraph that is a summary of Stern's article. If you want it to be a paragraph or one paragraph that talks about how certain kinds of surgery, especially laparoscopic surgery, can be improved through video games, then explain that. Maybe find another study that talks about a different kind of surgery that can be improved and bring that source in to help Stern back it up. Stern could show up in another paragraph that talks about how studies have shown that doctors who play video games do better. Stern cites the work of Dr. Rosser. Stern cites the work of the source Gentile. But Stern has to be given credit for identifying these two sources, because that's eventually where they're linked in the works cited page. Now, the Canarney paragraph is really a lot better, and in part because here you're doing the work. You're really the source of this. Seems to be a conversation you've had with the doctor. I would say that one of the issues with the introduction here is a simple thing to clean up when you say, when interviewing Dr. Joseph H. McCarney, he states, the interviewing was done by you, and you're not a part of this sentence. You can say, when I interviewed Dr. Joseph McCarney, he explained that surgeons, or in an interview with Dr. Joseph McCarney, he explained to me that surgeons should play video games. So that will clear that up. Again, this is good stuff. Then when we get to the article by Theiss, some more of this kind of confusing thing. I'm not quite sure what you mean by Elsie Favis, she interviewed a surgeon by Justin Barad. I suppose that Justin Barad is the surgeon she interviewed. It refers back to Barad. He's the guy who operated on the gorilla. And this is the section that I guess I really question whether we're still talking about video games or whether we're talking about a video trainer. This is a Time magazine invention. Is this on topic is one question I have. Does this mean that you have to broaden your thesis to talk about video games and video trainers making better surgeons? If that's the case, then if you want to include this in your paper, then you're going to have to include it in your thesis. I'll just leave it at that. All right, so that's where I see you are. I mean, you're halfway through the process. If you make revisions and want me to take a look at another working draft before the final submission, just email it to me, and I'll take a look at it and get back to you on Monday or Tuesday before the final one is due.